I wanted to take a moment today to remind everybody, whether it be a person that wants to become a police officer, a person that is a police officer, or maybe a civilian who is just curious about what it is that police officers do and how they're trained. This situation here, this man holding that knife and the way that he's holding it, this is 100% a lethal force situation. To say anything other than that is irresponsible and unsafe. So today we're going to talk about an incident that occurred on October the 6th, 2022 in the city of New York. The reason this came to my attention is because of a Facebook post made by NYPD. The Facebook post reads, "Earlier today, NYPD 52nd Precinct officers used a tremendous amount of restraint when responding to a man armed with a knife. The man became combative and slashed our officer on the nose. The suspect was arrested and the officer was treated and is in stable condition." The reason I take exception to this, and I suppose I should preface what I'm about to say, is that I'm going to make some statements that are critical of these officers' actions. It does not mean that I'm being critical of these officers. I want to offer my support to these officers. They showed a tremendous amount of courage confronting a man armed with a very dangerous weapon. They were very honorable and they were trying to resolve this situation peacefully, which is the goal at all times when police officers respond to a situation. My issue is that they did not respond in the manner that police officers are trained. I'll also tell you that I was not there. I've not been in this exact situation. The only people who have ever been in this exact situation are the officers that were there. It was a very fast-moving, high-evolving situation, and mistakes are going to be made when you're in those situations. God knows I have made a lot of mistakes in my career. The important thing is that we watch. Well, the most important thing is that they survived this encounter. But it's also important that when you do make a mistake on the job, you learn from that mistake, and we use the incident as an opportunity to train other people and remind them, what went on, and hopefully they will not make the same mistake in the future. We'll watch the video here in a second, but the problem is this was not a situation where the officers used restraint. This is a situation where one of these officers could have very easily been killed in this encounter. And had they responded with the appropriate level of force, that risk could have been mitigated. I guess, I don't know if everybody has seen the video, so let's watch it now, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to talk about it. Alrighty, this is where I want to start talking about the video. When someone is armed with a knife and you want to use non-lethal force against that person, there's a 5-prong test that we use, that we are trained to use. That test is you have to have time, distance, barrier, lethal force backup, and the availability of other options. This officer charged at a man who was presenting deadly force, and this officer did not have deadly force available to him. Unfortunately, this officer was actually quite severely wounded. I don't have the pictures to show you today, but the guy has this knife and he was able to reach out and slash the officer across the face. And I've seen the pictures on Instagram. I just wasn't able to find them for the making of this video. But he was injured quite seriously. If that guy would have been a couple centimeters off in one direction or the other, the officer would have probably lost an eye. It could have also could have also very easily been killed. A few more inches and it would have hit the officer's throat. This is a very dangerous, very deadly situation for the officers. I realize that they're trying to preserve life, but it's also important that you preserve your own life in these situations. It's not the job of a police officer to get himself seriously injured or killed in the line of duty. If we go back to the beginning of the video, it looked like it had some promise. Because here's a situation where these two officers appear to be drawing their lethal force. This guy does not have lethal force. At the moment, he does have time distance barrier and lethal force backup. But then as they move into the situation, and I'm not sure if he was thinking that the suspect was going to run towards the officers that had lethal force and he was going to use this, is this like a food cart or a newsstand or something to hide behind? That would have been acceptable. But instead, he charged at the officer and they found themselves in this situation. The other thing that I want to point out, not only is it not my job to charge at someone armed with a deadly weapon and get myself seriously hurt, it's also my job to make sure that none of my fellow officers are seriously hurt. So that if the officer here holding the taser put himself in a bad situation, that you as a backup officer is there to, for lack of a better term, bail him out of that situation. When officers approach a suspect like this, who is presenting deadly force, every officer on scene has a responsibility to draw their weapon and be prepared to use deadly force to respond to deadly force. Once you have the situation somewhat under control, and you might have the suspect barricaded, pinned, whatever, that's when you can stop and you can communicate with your partners and say, hey, look, you guys have deadly force. I'm going to try to tase him. It's never appropriate to use a taser as your first instrument when you're responding in a deadly force situation. This officer was very lucky that he was only seriously wounded. He could have very easily been killed. It's one thing for me when I'm on scene, if I see an officer do something that he shouldn't have done and he gets himself hurt. I can't imagine the amount of guilt that I would feel if I was on that scene as well and I did not stop my partner from either being killed or seriously wounded. We all have a responsibility to protect each other in these situations. This guy, if he had turned and run towards those people in the background, he could have very easily seriously injured or killed one of them. The moment we have right here would have been a perfect situation for this officer to use his firearm and end this encounter. His backdrop was clear. This was about as safe as a situation he could have gotten in. I don't know. I saw this post. It really bothered me because to say that this is a situation where the officers used restraint, it's not responsible. We should not be encouraging our officers to respond to deadly force in a way like this. We should not be teaching the public that this is the appropriate way to respond to lethal force. The officer made a mistake. The officer survived. Thank God. But the officer was seriously injured. If he had done what he was trained to do initially, he might have still been injured. But he might not have been. It's hard to tell. But the only thing I know is that you should learn from these things, move on, and not make the same mistake again. Those are my thoughts for today. Thank you for watching. I'll talk to you soon.